Hi everybody, this is Gina of Brownie Knits and welcome to the video for blocking and seaming of the Brownie Knits 2015 block blanket along. So if you've gotten this far, you have knitted all of your blocks or almost all of your blocks for the blanket and you're ready to block them and then seam them together. So for blocking, I like to use Eucalyptus. It's a no rinse wash. That is perfect for your hand knits and for all different fibers. So I'm pretty sensitive to perfumes and things, and I like Eucalyptus unscented because it doesn't bother me at all, and it really softens up your knits. So this bottle, let's see, it's a 16.9 fluid ounces, and I purchased it for $13 US. So a bottle of Eucalyptus this size usually lasts me most of a year, even though I wash all of my hand knits quite frequently. So you would put a cap full, so I just used this little cap. I put a cap full into some water in my sink. I submerge the knit, and in this case you might want to block your blocks individually. So submerge those, let them soak for just a little bit, and then roll them out in a towel to get the majority of the moisture out. And then I block mine. I have an actual blocking board that has measurements on it. And I will then block it to size with these little T-pins. So they look like a T, that's why they're called T-pins. And then I just let it air dry. That way all pinned out to the size and shape that I want. If you don't have a blocking board, you can, before I had my blocking board, I would lay down some old towels on the floor and to protect the carpet. And then I would take a measuring tape, measure out my what I wanted my garments to be, and would pin these right into the floor. So you can do it a few different ways. Okay, so that's blocking. Okay, so now we have blocked all of our blocks out and we're ready to seam them together. So all of your blocks will have the same number of stitches at the top and bottom because that's how it's written in the pattern. But your blocks might have different numbers of rows depending on the block. So that's fine. I'm going to show you how to seam with the mattress stitch to the top and bottom and to the sides. I would suggest that you lay out your blocks all together and decide what order you want them in. There are only a couple of the blocks that should be maybe in the center. Block number 2, for example, the petals block, would be best if it was surrounded on all 4 sides. But outside of that, the majority of the rest of them can kind of be wherever you would like. Okay, so this one I'm going to seam these so that these blocks are the block 3, I believe this is, the clover leaves block is going to go above my April block, which is the butterflies block. So what I would do, take some split stitch markers or some safety pins with that are coilless, meaning that they don't have the little coil sitting right there, and just pin them together with the wrong sides together. And you don't have to do a lot of them. For this one, I'm just going to do 3. So one at each of the 2 corners, and then one in the middle. So in this instance, we're going to be blocking the bind off edge of the butterfly block to the cast on edge of the clover leaves block. So got it pinned, and then we're going to take a tapestry needle, yarn darning tapestry needle, whatever you want to call them. They have like a large eye opening there, and then a little twist at the end to uptick the end. All right, we're going to take that, and then we're going to take some thread. Now for your block blanket, you can use a matching thread. For demonstration purposes here, I'm going to use a contrast thread so that you guys can see it a little bit easier. And just thread that through the eye of your tapestry needle. Oh, sorry about that. Hit the top of my light box, not good. Okay, so then over here, and you can go ahead and take that one off. It's really just so that we could make sure that they were pinned so that they would match up. So over here, you're gonna go so that you are going right at the corner stitch. So we've gone right through the corner stitch. Sure, I need to watch my hands through the camera and not through life so that I see what you're seeing, right? And then you're going to go through the first stitch of the bind off row on the butterfly. So just pull through both of those. While you're doing mattress stitch, you can kind of leave it loosey a little bit like that so you can see where you're working. That's fine. And the key with mattress stitch is that you're going to go back in where you came out of, and then you're going to scoop a stitch. So see how we've got two legs here of the stitch? So I went back in where I came out of the first time, and I'm scooping two legs, and I'm going to pull that through. And then I'm going to come back to my second piece, and I'm going to go in where I came out, and I'm going to scoop a stitch. Pull that through. And what's going to happen, you're actually forming a V with your contrast yarn. So go back in the first piece where you came out, scoop a stitch, pull it through. Go to your second piece where you came out, scoop a stitch. And you can tell on this piece I'm having a little bit more trouble with scooping my stitch. It's because it keeps wanting to split the yarn, so you just have to make sure that you don't split a piece of the yarn. Pull that through. So see, now we've got two V's there. Go back in the first piece where you came out, scoop a stitch, pull it. Go back in the second piece where you came out, scoop a stitch, pull it through. Go back in the first. So you just keep repeating this over and over until you have your entire row done. And as you go along, you can actually pull this to tighten it up. If you pull both ends, tighten it up, it actually goes away and you don't see your seaming yarn. Magic. So this is a mattress stitch is by far my favorite way to seam anything together. It works really well for all types of different garments. So, and if it gets too tight when you pull it, like I'm not sure I pulled enough yarn, yeah, I probably did, then you can always go back and like untighten it like that. All right, so I'm going to finish up this row, and then when I'm at the end of the row, I'm going to show you it seamed together. All right, so I'm here toward the end of my row, and on the beginning of the row, you can see I kind of pulled as I went along so that I didn't have to pull the whole thing at the end. But you can, you know, it really does work both ways, as long as you don't split your, if sometimes it'll catch and not let you completely pull if you like split between a piece of the thread. See how that's split? That might give you a little bit of issue when you go to pull it taut, but other than that, it should work out just fine. Because we did 52 stitches at the top and bottom, it's a 1-to-1 ratio, so it should work out perfectly for you. And then at the very end, you want to go down and scoop just like normal, and then I'm going to scoop there, and then just go in one last time onto both. Just go down. There's not really anything to scoop because you're on the edge. Just go down. Great. So we've gotten it all sewn up, and now we're just ready to give it a good strong tug. If it fights you at all, you can just, really put some strength into it until it's all seamed together. And you don't see it at all. It's like magic. So there's the front. And then your back will have like a little seam there, which is fine. But really, I can just bury those ends now and leave my green yarn in, and you would never know it. So that's how you do the top and the bottom, okay? And then you need to sew the sides together for some of them, right? Now the sides can be a little bit trickier than the top and the bottom because the sides are not going to have the same number of rows on every block. For some of our patterns, you had to repeat more rows to get the same number of inches than you did others. So that's where these guys play a more important role. I'm going to take this block, which was, is this our X's and O's block? Yes. This is our love block. So this was my love to my mom for May, for her birthday and my birthday. Okay, so we're going to take the sides, and again we're pinning the wrong, so that the wrong sides are together. You want to be able, when you're seaming, you want to have the right sides facing you when you're knitting, which is a little bit different than if you were like sewing. Let me make sure I have, yeah. So this pin is pinning the wrong sides together so that the right sides are out of our cast on rows for both of these blocks. And then I'm going to pin together the bind off stitch, last stitch for each. You might find it easier to have your ends woven in for your blocks before you start seaming. It's kind of totally up to you, really. Right, so I'm going to pin that together, and then I'm going to kind of hold them and eyeball where I think the middle of both blocks are. And I'm going to put in another one there. Now, if you're finding that you have two blocks that you're seaming together that are like super drastically different, you can also then place more pins in. You could pin it in between so that you'd have 5 pins instead of 3. I do this when I'm seaming sweaters, and I mean, I do it when I'm doing anything. It kind of just helps you to, I even do this with pins when I'm picking up stitches and it says to pick up evenly. If, for example, it says to pick up 100 between here and here, I would pin the spot betweens, right? And then I would pin halfway between, and then I'd pin halfway between that. And then I would have 4 sections, and I would know I need to do 25, 25, 25, and 25. And that way it's a lot easier to make sure that you're picking up evenly when you only have to do 25 between a certain space versus maybe 100 between a larger space. So that's another way that I use my pins. So I've got it pinned here together. What this is going to do in terms of seaming, we're going to know that this section needs to be seamed together. So if it's not a direct 1-to-1 ratio, then we're going to see that as we're going. And if you need to go through one here on the bottom one and then two on the top one every now and then, you're going to see that within a smaller frame, and you can do that. And then that way your one with warm blocks ends up looking like it's the same height as your one. Well, it is the same height, looks like the same number of rows to make up that height as the other block. All right, so I'm going to get my thread again, my yarn. Again, you can use a matching yarn. I'm just using a contrast for this video so that you can see it. And I'm going to put it into my eye of my tapestry needle. All right, and then, okay, I'm actually going to move this little guy, since I'm going to start there on the edge. I'm just going to put him there, just to kind of help us out. So then you go down here, and on your corner stitch, so you're coming, make sure you don't split anything. So you're coming up so that there's like a full stitch on the bottom there. And then over here, you're going to do the same thing. It can be a little bit tricky to see on the corners. So up there. Now, when we did our top to bottom, we went back in where we came out of and we scooped a stitch this way, right? So we were able to scoop the V and see a stitch. When you're scooping garter in going this direction, you're going to go in to where you came out of just like before, but you're going to scoop the garter bump. See that bump right there? So that's the stitch that you're scooping. Go in where you came out of, scoop your garter, come out. Go in where you came out, and you're scooping that garter. Now sometimes that's going to mean that you might get like a little line here too. See that one? But it's that garter that you see that you're scooping. Go in where you came out, scoop your garter. Now I like to scoop the garter that is actually here a little bit in, instead of this bump that forms when you're turning your rows. I like to do this one. I just think it looks a little bit neater, but you know, to each knitter their own. So go in, scoop the where you came out of, scoop that garter bump, come back up. And again, it's forming these little, you know, V stitches sort of things on the sides. And you can leave them loose until you're ready to pull it tighter. So I go down, scoop our garter. Let's actually go down. Scoop that garter. Go down, scoop that garter. All right, so this works really well when you are one-to-one, right? And for this block, these two blocks, they're not too far off from one-to-one, but they're a little bit not the same. So in this case, I think this bottom one might have more rows than my top one does. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to scoop. I'm going to go in where I came out. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to go in where I came out and I'm going to scoop 2 this time. See, 1, 2. And then up on my top one, I'm just going to scoop 1. So then I just scooped a 2 to 1. So 2 rows here to 1 row there. And I'm pretty sure that I split somewhere back in here. I got my yarn caught in half a stitch. I split the yarn somewhere because it's not pulling so that I can close that up. So that's just a learning lesson that you have to be careful of, otherwise it will show. So if you're using the same color yarn, it's not that big of a deal, but after I'm done with this video, I'll just go back and take this one out and redo that. But I'm gonna keep going here. All right, so we go back in where we came out, scoop 1, in where we came out, scoop 1, in where we came out, scoop 1, in where we came out, scoop 1. And then if I look, I can see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 left there before I get to that safety marker. And on the bottom, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I need to scoop one more time a double row down here. Boop, scooped 2, scoop 1, scoop 1, scoop 1, scoop 1, oopsie, see right there I split it, that's why it wouldn't pull to dissolve so earlier. So scoop 1 and scoop 1. Scoop 1. All right, now we are to the one with the safety pin, and I can see that I'm scooping and I'm scooping and it's even. And then you can take your safety pin out and you can, I'm probably put it up here so that I can use it a little bit later in the row to make sure I'm even. But you can see how having that safety pin lets you see directly how many rows more you might have than the other one, so that you can kind of fudge it and make them come out the same when you're seaming. And just like before, you give it a good pull and it'll dissolve away. And this one little spot where it didn't dissolve is because I split the yarn. You just have to be really careful about that. And so there we go. It'll look all nice and seamed together. Like I said, on the other one, you'll still have a seam here. Now, you do see on the back side of this side seam, you will see the contrasting yarn here more. So that's why I do recommend that you use the same colored yarn. But if it was like a sweater or something, they're not going to see the inside of your sweater, so it wouldn't really matter, right? All right, so there you go. That's how you do it. You can also, when you're doing garter, if you wanted, you can just go just the garter bump on the edge. And that'll give you less of a seam on the inside. So you're not going in where you came out, you're just going, it's just another way to do it. So see, I'm not going in where I came out. So I came out here, I'm not going back in there, I'm just gonna go up to my next garter. So this is another way that you can do it. It's totally up to you. The same applies here. If you need to adjust so that you just do, 1 up here and you need to do 2 here, you go through 1, 2 garter bumps. The trick here is to make sure that then if you are, always going through the same line of bumps. And what I mean by that is if you're going to go through here, go through there on every row that you do. But if you're going to go through this little turning edge bump, then always go through that. So don't mix it up because then you'd have a jog in your seam. So then it's just like the other one. You give it a good chunky pull and it'll come together. But you will see that a little bit more. At least in my experience, that's what has happened. So that's why I like the first one better, a bit better. But the second one's probably easier to do. So it's totally up to whatever you prefer. Right. Okay, so I hope you've had fun and you are now off and running to do your seaming. All right, happy knitting. Bye-bye.